Help us keep the Product Porch lights on by giving at patreon.com/theproductporch. Please review the podcast on your favorite platform. Your reviews help new listeners discover us. Thanks.
I have a phrase that I love. My wife does not love this phrase, so take it for what it's worth. But some of my friends do. Your obvious is your art.
Ooh, I love that. Welcome to the Product Porch. I'm Joe Golick. Today, Todd Blackier and I are joined by Nils Davis to discuss different product manager spikes, how to discover your own, and get the most from them. Now settle in, folks, because on the Product Porch, every topic is a product topic.
Oh my gosh, Joe, I am so excited to talk to you about a topic today that's been on my mind for a minute. But before we do, today we're joined on the Product Porch by our good friend, Nils Davis. He's been an enterprise software product manager for more than 30 years. He's had successes and failures and learned from them all, which is great. Hey, you learned from them, Nils?
It's the least you can do, it seems like.
And to help product managers get started in the role, which is often really hard to get your first product manager role, he wrote the Secret Product Manager Handbook. He's also the host of the Secrets of Product Management podcast, and he contributes often to LinkedIn and other media platforms. That's where we got connected. I think I just started following Nils stuff because he's so cool. And already in 2024, he's helped more than 150 product managers transform their resumes, even some of my friends. Thank you, Nils. And welcome to the Product Porch.
It is fantastic to be here. I can't wait. I forgot to bring my sweet iced tea to the porch. Unfortunately, I have water.
Where are the hush puppies or the biscuits?
Seriously, I mean, I have some water, but it's not sweet iced tea, which seems like I'm missing the boat here. I'm really excited to be here. I think it's going to be a fun topic. I know what the topic is. Although I would, of course, be happy to just riff on whatever you brought up, Todd.
So I have something I want to share with you guys, and I'm really curious about your feedback on this. I've heard this a lot recently. I've talked to people, friends of mine, who are trying to get their next product manager role, and they're struggling with a certain question. They're hearing this question in interviews, and it goes something like this. Tell me what your product managers, where do you spike in product management? Or tell me what your product manager superpower is. And they're kind of getting stuck on that. And it makes me wonder, what do you think of when you hear product spike, or where do you spike?
Oh, so I have so many different thoughts about this, Todd. And we'll get to the actual spikes. But the first thing is, as product managers, we're unicorns already. We're very unusual amongst the group of all the other folks in the business. We're also the smallest organization, with the potential exception of product marketing. But we are we come in, and to be effective as product managers, we have to have a bunch of kind of unique or specific characteristics that mean we probably wouldn't be that good at most other roles within the business, to be honest. And so that's one thing. We're already kind of spiking just the fact that we're product managers. That's the first thing to note. The second thing is, as part of that, we're really M-shaped, and we're not T-shaped. We're M-shaped. We typically have multiple depth areas, as well as a large amount of, or maybe you call it pie shape, like the letter pi, right?
Right.
We have a wide range of things that we are competent at, and then usually multiple things that we're very good at. And so we're a little different from some people who are T-shaped, right?
Right.
A wide list of competence, but one deep thing. So those are some of the things that I think about. Now, obviously, given that we're unicorns, we're actually unicorns of different colors. And so then I think we get to the question of, okay, what color are you? In terms of being a unicorn, we're unusual, but what are the differences between us, right? And that's where things get a little more interesting.
I am so obviously red. I'm so obviously a red unicorn, but and Joe is blue. We have to be pretty different.
I'm totally an iridescent unicorn. I do not even shy away from that.
That's a big word. For those who don't know that word, what color is iridescent?
Iridescent is it means kind of all colors. It means I reflect in lots of different colors, or I'm shiny. I don't know. It's a little girl's word, really, but I love iridescence. And actually, it's interesting. I used to do some glass blowing, and the people that I learned from were students of the style of glass which Louis Comfort Tiffany did in the early part of the 20th century. And it's iridescent. That's one of the things that makes it really cool to look at. And I've always associated myself with iridescence. And it just means I kind of have lots of different colors that I reflect.
It reminds me of a friend of mine who used to say his favorite color was shiny. What's your favorite color? Shiny.
It's interesting, Todd. You and I talked earlier today, and I told you I was struggling with this.
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I'm like, well, what do you think it is? You had said, and I was really honored with what you said to me. You're like, Joe, you're passionate about helping people. You really care about what you do. You care about people being successful. You go above and beyond what you need to do. And I've had people give me that feedback. My father-in-law actually once gave me that feedback. He's like, oftentimes you do that at your own detriment. Right. But it's interesting because I think the epiphany I had was, it's something that is just, it comes to you. It's not something you have to think about. It's just a natural reaction to a situation. Right. It's like when you and I teach, I feel like even on a Zoom call, I can look at people's reactions, the way that they move, their eyes, and I can kind of read the room a little bit. I can walk into a room and I have a pretty good idea who I can navigate and have a conversation with, even if I don't know who they are. So I have like that awareness. And I think when we talked about this topic, your feedback back to me, it was more like, okay, it's something that's just innate. Like God, not to get spiritual, but it's like, when you came into this earth, God said, you're going to be really, it's just part of your DNA.
I have a phrase that I love. My wife does not love this phrase, so take it for what it's worth. But some of my friends do. Your obvious is your art.
I love
the things that for you are so easy that it seems like nothing, and that everyone should be able to do it, and yet they can't.
Yeah.
Or it's not obvious to them, or it seems special to them. That is potentially one of your superpowers, and not just as a product manager, but as anybody.
It reminds me of when I was younger. So when I was in my teens, I played basketball and I had natural athleticism, natural hops. I learned really quickly that I could jump really high, and I wanted to dunk so bad. So I would practice all the time. I'm like, I'm going to dunk. And I still remember the first time I dunked too. And people made fun of me because I jumped around like an idiot, but I was so happy. But what's funny is that was my whole game was going to the hoop. And, for people that aren't big basketball fans, hoops 10 feet high up in the air. It's a little bit challenging to get up there. And after a while, it was really easy for me. And I had a friend of mine who used to ask like, hey, Todd, I want to get better at layups. Can you help me? Like, how do I get better at layups? And I said, well, you just jump as high as you can and you drop the ball in. Like, duh. Jump as high as you can, drop the ball in. Piece of cake. I'm in my 40s now. Those hops are long gone. I don't remember what it's like to jump that high. I have to lie. I think or like tell myself something. I asked my friend, did I dunk? Did I really? They're like, yes, you did. I can't remember. But now when I go to lay up, it's so far away. The hoop is so far away. It's so hard. And I realized that is horrible advice. I gave him horrible advice because, to your point, it was one of my spikes. It was natural. It was obvious as it was my art. It was obvious. And so replicating it was really challenging.
There are pluses and minuses to these obvious things. One is you often don't recognize that you're different.
Yeah.
And that's a problem for you, because if you knew that you were different in that way, you could start to take advantage of that, in the sense of it's the place where you don't have to, where it's not hard for you to achieve things. And so maybe you should focus your energy on achieving things in that area, as opposed to putting effort into the things that are hard for you that other people are probably better at. Right. But the flip side is you cannot teach people to do it. Right. Your sense of what's happening is wrong, because it seems easy to you and it's not easy to other people. And so that's a challenge that you have to deal with. Like if like your friend who wanted to learn how to lay up from you, you could have potentially helped that person, but not until you realize that, oh, this is a thing that's super easy for me. And so I have to look at it from outside, or get some perspective, or maybe read a book to find out what I'm doing.
Right.
before I can really teach anybody in a valuable way.
Yeah.
And so oftentimes our superpowers are actually, we can't help other people with that superpower oftentimes, unless we do a lot of work.
What do you guys think? Like, how do we know what our spike is? How do we find that?
There's been in our careers, all of us have been working 20 plus years. We've been exposed or introduced to different tooling. Organizations struggle with this, right? Whether it be, I think Todd, you, Ryan, and I were talking about this on another podcast or separately, DISC assessments, right? There's personality assessments, because organizations do this. They want to make sure there's the right fit of personalities. And for me, in my early 20s, I did one of these and it was like mind blowing. I'm like, whoa. And I was scared. I was scared about it. And it was the first time that I started to get the hint of, this is where you're really good at, Joe. And I was worried they were going to take me out of my job. I didn't really embrace, well, because you don't know, right? Are they going to take me out of my job? Are they going to fire me because I have a high enough number in this area, or I'm not a high enough D or high enough S or whatever.
By the way, if worrying is a spike, Joe's got that nailed.
I got that down. Yeah. I think some of that's just Catholic guilt, but in any case, I think that's one way that I became aware of it. Now, the second way was we used a tool called Strategic Coach, which is when I was at Mark Travel, now Hyatt. And one of the exercises was, send people that are not in your work network, but in your personal network, and say, hey, tell me what you think I'm really good at. And it was weird. It was really weird. But I got some interesting answers from my father-in-law and my uncle. And it was I never knew that they viewed me in this way, but it helped me get an idea of who I am.
Well, so it's a fantastic question, and it's not easy, I would say, is the first thing, right?
Yeah.
It's not obvious to you. I mean, it's too obvious to you. It's kind of in your face.
Right.
It's like water for a fish, right? In a certain sense.
Right.
I always recommend people do the Clifton Strengths Finder assessment.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's a relatively cheap thing. You can do it on your own. You get a pretty interesting set of answers. And I have found that to be one of the things that really helped me understand what I was good at and I think that there are spikes that are discoverable by Clifton Strengths Finder.
Right.
And ones that it ignores, that it doesn't know anything about. My wife and I and a bunch of our friends and daughters and we help lots of people do this. There's another assessment called the Johnson O'Connor Aptitudes Assessment. And that's not a cheap one. You have to actually pay. It takes 2 days, but it's very rigorous. And I can give people a link in the show notes or whatever. But that one is another really good one that really helps people understand what your aptitudes are. And the idea, of course, is related to what Joe was saying. It's not just knowing what they are, but then focusing on using them,
right,
and not trying to be successful with things that you're bad at, right? Because the way to get unhappy is to do something that demands you have an aptitude that you don't have. Now, sometimes you can manage that, right? You can mitigate that, right? But and I find that with the Clifton Strengths, because there's strengths that I wish I had that are very low for me. They're really weaknesses, but they're very important for success. So what am I going to do? Either I have to use the strengths that I have to sort of go a different way, or I have to get help, or I have to just get ready to do unpleasant things for myself. And I use all of those things. For a long time, I didn't really think of myself as a creative person. Now, my family said I was creative. They said, "Oh, you're a good writer, Nils," blah, blah, blah. And then I took the Clifton Strengths Finder, and it said I was strong in ideation. And I thought, that doesn't seem right. But then I started to pay attention to what I did. And I had lots of ideas all the time. I always came up with ideas and solutions. And it was this weird transformation to realize, oh, I am a really creative person. And I didn't think I was, because it was just sort of normal. I didn't think didn't seem, but then I started to say, oh, well, how can I get better at this? How can I use it more? How can I use it more effectively? How can I
Right.
use it to mitigate things that I'm not good at, right? Another thing is to listen to what people are saying about you, right? This goes back to your experience, Joe. What do people say about you? And it's easy to discount the things they say, because the things that they say will to you sound like, well, that's dumb. Everybody's like that.
You know, I love that you mentioned this, Nils, because that's what I thought of. And here's a strange dichotomy here, is I did used to think, well, you could just ask people. And I'd ask people for feedback all the time.
Yeah.
And people would give me feedback. But I realized this, often when you put someone on a spot and say, hey, tell me what I'm strong in, they won't state the obvious things. They just won't state them. Because why am I going to tell you that? They're looking for something else. They're trying to look for something deeper. And what's interesting, I love what you said, Nils. Listen, just listen to what people are saying. I had one recently at work. I'll share one. Storytelling. So at work, when I go to test users on a concept, I love making storyboards. And like, I like to make little picture books. I make them like Dick and Jane. I make like little Dick and Jane books. And that's what I use to go validate. And I bring them out and I tell little stories and I get reactions. That helps me. Well, in doing that, I was sharing that with my CEO, who was working with a writer to help tell our story. He's working with this writer, and then he showed the writer, oh, I got to show you this thing Todd made. It's really cool. The storyboard he's making for concept validation. He shows her, and she looks at it and goes, why am I writing? Like, just use that. Like, Todd made it. And so he came back and he told me this story, and he's like, we need to leverage your storytelling abilities more in this company. Like, we just need to use that more. And it's funny, as I started describing to him, I'm like, well, thank you. I really appreciate that. Appreciate that feedback. And yeah, I'd love to do that. I actually said it out loud to him. I said, to be fair, I started my career in video creation. So in my mind, I'm going like, well, duh. I've been telling stories my whole life. I make videos. This is what I do. In saying it out loud is when I realized, oh my goodness, I took this little skill that I had and I've been applying it in my product career and never even thought of it as, I would have never said that was how I spike. I would have never said that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd let it try a game. Let's see if we could play a little game here.
Yeah.
Let's see if we could, maybe we've seen it in other people. We've seen product managers with these spikes, but let's just see if we can hit some, like, here are some interesting spikes that you could have in product management. And who knows, maybe someone listening would be like, oh, that might be me.
Well, let me share one that's one of my strengths, which I love.
All right.
And once I learned about it, and it became clear to me that it was not everybody had it. I have a strength that's called connectivity, which means that I see how things are connected. It's actually not literally how they describe it, but the way that I use it, I see how different things are connected. And it brings me back when I was a kid. There was a show on TV on PBS. It was a British show called Connections, and this guy would take something that in history, and he would show how it connected, throughout history into finally being related to canned food or something like that. Like the sandals that the Roman soldiers wore, and how it, and I just, that's kind of stuff, I loved it. And I feel like that's a really valuable product management skill, because I can see how, the connection between like company success or customer happiness and company success, right? It's really a very concrete view to me, and I don't need to have the thing that says what's the value of customer success from a dollar standpoint. I can just say, oh, company goes out of business if we don't have that,
right?
And in some sense, right, I abstract the whole thing. So to me, that's one of the ones that I think is really valuable that I have, because and then the other thing is, for me, I'm really bad on the execution strengths, basically. Getting things done is just not my strong suit, so I have to do other things. And so the things that I always think that I'm so impressed with is that people who can. One of the people that I used to work with, she was a designer, not a product manager, although she got into product management, was like, I'm not good at making appointments. I can say, I want to talk to this guy, I have this thing I want to learn about, and it'll take me a while to get that together, like a couple days.
Right.
There's no reason. It's completely irrational, but it's just the way it is. And I would mention it to this person, and within 15 minutes, I'd have an appointment on my calendar. She just was really good at it. And I don't know what strength that is, but that's one I wish I had, because that would be really valuable to me. So just the ability to sort of make that kind of connection I love it.
I like the wish we had. I'll tell you a spike I wish I had.
Yeah.
I went to an event in Las Vegas, an industry event. And look, we're doing it right now. We're having a deep conversation. I will do this all day long with anyone. I love these conversations. You know what I can't do? I struggle so much with just, what do they call them? Just shooting the bull, fluffy conversations. What do they call that? Like the highlight, chit chat. How's the weather? How many kids do you have? 3 kids. Blah, blah. I stink at this. I don't get it. And everything in my brain, by the way, it just says, the signals in my brain just go, ask about their problems in their hospice right now. Ask them about what challenges they're facing. And I know we're not supposed to do that yet. I know we have to do all the other chit chat stuff. I stink at it. And I watch other people at this conference who I work with who are just brilliant at it. And they're just building relationships. And they're seeing someone saying, hey, I haven't seen you since Kentucky. And they're giving each other big hugs. And I'm like, I don't know how anyone does this. I wish I had that spike. And so that in product management, why is that valuable? You put people at ease. If you can put stakeholders at ease and customers at ease, you pull information and they start to work with you, and you could persuade. They'll listen to you.
It's that know, like, and trust.
Yes.
Thing, right. You really want people to know, like, and trust you. And then you can get information from them. Right.
Absolutely.
So Todd, I still get Christmas cards from my vendors from when I worked at Baird because of that.
Such a Joe.
I actually got invited to somebody's wedding. Wedding.
That's incredible.
That doesn't surprise me.
No, I would be in my element, man. I'd be like, all right, let's go. Let's go.
Joe wants to meet everyone. I always say Joe's a golden retriever. Joe just thinks everybody's his friend.
I will go and get a new shirt. Be like, okay, what shirt am I going to wear when I go do this? Because I got to be like I got to be like mentally ready. Anyways, that's a different discussion for a different day. Todd, you kind of stole my thunder a little bit, but stakeholder management. No. Stakeholder management, right? Like we talk about the spikes I look for in a product manager. Are you comfortable having uncomfortable conversations with people?
Oh my gosh, that's such a spike.
Right?
Yeah.
Can you say the uncomfortable thing? Can you push back when everyone in the room disagrees with you? Yeah. Can you say the thing that needs to be said? Yeah. That is a spike.
And you got to do it in a way that's calm, unemotional, but you have the backbone and the intestinal fort. And that's hard you can't interview that. You got to know that about the person, right? That's a really critical spike, because we talk about the different types of stakeholders you got to deal with, and some are going to be a little ornery. How are you going to manage them? How are you going to handle them? And that, if you can do that, you're going to go really far in your career.
Yeah. I'll tell you another one, because that pinged my brain for another one. Another one I know of a spike is getting excited about your own ideas. I know that sounds silly, but I watched this creative director at another company, and every time he shared an idea, he just brought joy with him. I struggle with that too, because I tend to be very pragmatic, and I'm like, let's look at the numbers. Let's look at this. I can tell a story. I'm good at storytelling, but watching him just take joy in this thing. And I could see that's persuasion. If you want to be good at persuasion, be really good at being joyful in your own ideas. He was fantastic at that. Do you think of any other ones? Any other spikes that came to mind? I have a couple others came to mind.
For me, I've
seen
the ability to empathize.
Mm-hmm.
It's so basic.
No,
by the way, that's a word. By the way, that's a new teenage word. Basic. It's so basic. So I
think I feel like that's a requirement. That's one of the characteristics that you'd have to bring to product management.
Right.
Is empathy. Either
correct.
You have to,
but it has to be genuine.
or you have to.
I feel like it has to be genuine.
Or you have to be really good at faking it. Maybe, I don't know if that is actually possible, but that's a good question, right? What are the characteristics of great product managers? And obviously, empathy is one.
Yeah.
But does it have to be does it have to be like if there was a Clifton Strengths Finder assessment for empathy, would you have to score high on it? I assume so, but I think there are successful product managers who maybe aren't in one of the empathetic roles, right? There's you can imagine different product managers doing different things within a company, and some of them don't require as much empathy, potentially, depending on how you divide them up, right?
I agree with you. I have a new term I've been using. I call it pragmatic empathy. And I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
So this is my only fear about having like the true empath. My only fear, you have to have the self-control to know, when something is wrong to do. So just because a customer, a market, a user feels pain doesn't mean you need to solve that pain.
That's right.
Just because there's a problem doesn't mean you need to solve that problem. And so I started using the term pragmatic empathy, meaning you have to be able to say like, yes, it's a problem, but I'm going to ignore it.
Right.
And as a product manager, I feel like I ignore more problems than I solve.
For sure. Yeah. Being able to say no, it's critical.
Yeah, okay.
Even to good ideas, right? Yeah.
Yep.
Well, and that goes to, maybe it's the previous one, is the ability to say no.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and maybe that goes back to saying the uncomfortable, like, to stakeholders, like being able to say no.
Being good at saying no, though. I mean, our buddy Ryan, I think he says no really well. He should teach people how to say no. I've seen him say no in meetings, and he does a good job of saying no, and no one in the room knows he said no, and they're all just kind of going along. I'm like, Ryan just disagreed with everybody, and we turned the other direction. Didn't you notice what Ryan just did? He turned us around.
Well, my daughters would say he low-key convinced everybody to say no.
Low-key.
He low-key convinced everyone to say it. He low-key said no.
It was really sus. It was really sus. Not mid. It wasn't mid, though.
That was one of my reputations, was being able to say no to customers in a way that made them happy. And in a way that also, I got this feedback from a salesperson who said that one of the reasons they liked working with me was because I could say no to a customer and give them reasons that they would feel comfortable with, and that also the sales team could then use in case it came up again. Yep. So it was sort of a transference, in a sense, of the language. One of my favorite stories is about working with a customer and getting them to say, "Oh, I guess that was a bad idea after all, wasn't it?" By leading them. But the fact is, it was the thing that they wanted was impossible, and I helped them understand that. But if you can get the customer to say, "Oh, yeah, no, that was a bad idea," that's a really fun skill to have.
Right. It reminds me of, I think in our industry, what's different in our field of product management, and I don't know, maybe it's similar in other fields, but in our field of product management, what's interesting is that I don't think there's actually a discrete set of product management specific abilities. Or maybe there is, but it's a very small list. I think I'm going to use a bad metaphor. I think we're more like a parasite. I think we steal abilities from everywhere else. Or let me say this in a more positive way. I think if you have a former field, and what product manager started in product management? We all started somewhere else. You take those abilities from your former field and you find a way to apply them. Even you were a teacher at one point, and now you're a product manager. If you take those teaching abilities and leverage them in how you communicate the needs of your customers to your engineers, or take that teaching ability for how you train the salespeople or speak to the marketing team about what the key messages are of your product. Like, you can leverage your teaching skills as a product manager. And so I think that in product management, there's a lot, as I look around at the other fields, I'm like, there's a lot that you can just use from other fields.
I would say that the fundamental characteristic that you have to bring as a product manager is a flexible mind. And that's one example of that, right? Of being able to take some other thing that you learned and use it. Right. But there's also the fact that you have to switch context all the time. You have to be ready for anything to come at you. You can't be the kind of person who needs to sit and stew on something for days or weeks at a time. because that just won't work. I mean, developers that is a good characteristic for a developer, right?
Right.
Get into the product, focus on it for 3 days in a row. But as product managers, we know we never focus on anything for more than 37 seconds. Right?
It's true. Well, in a given day, right? In one given day, you could be working with the marketing team on some key messaging. You could be interviewing a customer. You could be writing user stories. You could be discussing a completely different epic end feature with your development team than the one that you're writing. You are jumping around from different points in the product, from different points in the life cycle, from different, from anywhere from bringing it up to managing pricing.
Ground level and 30,000 foot, in the same, in like one in 10 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So you have to be good at switching contexts in that way. And like it too, because you can't get away from it. You have to not just be good at it, but like it.
Yeah, I agree.
And I'm Todd, I think this was like the first podcast we talked about. It was, I jokingly said, I love swimming in the gray.
Yeah.
Right? Because product management.
No. You said I bathe in the gray.
Oh, sorry.
I remember because it ruined my night.
I tell people, right, when we talk about prioritization methods or we talk about roadmap, I'm like, listen, guys, this is more art than it is science. Mm-hmm. It is not black and white. Mm-hmm. You have to be able to handle ambiguity. You have to be able to formulate an opinion and back it up. Right. But you have to realize your way of doing something may not be the same way that your counterpart's going to do it. And that's okay.
That's okay.
Right. That's okay. Right. I don't know what to call that. I don't know what spike that is.
Well, I don't think that's a spike. That's the thing is I think there's some foundational skills. And I think what we're talking about is just some foundational, because look, honestly, if you are someone who needs rigidity, who needs to know steps 1, 2, and 3, and steps 1, 2, and 3 are always the same. And you're also someone who cannot be flexible, right? You're going to hate this career.
Yeah, you're not going to be a good product manager.
And it's going to limit you. You're going to be stuck very junior. You're going to hate it. Like, you have to be someone who actually gets excited. Because that's the thing is, I get excited. I want to be in all the meetings. Not that I love meetings, but I want to talk about pricing. I want to talk about messaging. I want to talk about packaging. I want to have all the conversations. And so it's exciting to me, all the change.
Yeah, makes total sense. I totally agree. Yeah, that's why we're unicorns. Going back to the original thing, other people. You have to be a very special combination of mindset and characteristics and skills to be effective, and then you bring your spikes as well, right?
Well, let's talk about the different color unicorns because I like that. And we just gave examples of all sorts of unicorns, and there are, by the way, some executioning. Oh, that sounds bad. People who execute well, Spike. There's unicorns who execute well.
Yeah, no, most people are way better at executing than I am.
There's some project managers project management abilities, I think, are really good as a product manager if you have both. But what I was going to say was, let's talk about the stable of unicorns, because it brings us to that other question that we prompted earlier about, now you're a leader of product managers. You have teams. What are you looking for? Do you want everyone to grow their areas of weakness? Mm-hmm. Are you looking people to focus on their spikes? And I'd love to hear what you guys think about that.
It's interesting. So when I was in travel, what they would do when they interviewed people is they would have them do the Myers-Briggs. They wanted to know their scores because they wanted to know how would this person complement the weaknesses on the team. Which was interesting. I have an appreciation for that. And even when I worked with Midwest Airlines, I had a coworker of mine, Linda, who I learned a lot from. I remember she telling me she was hiring for someone on her team. And she's like, I didn't want to hire someone that was like me. I needed to hire someone that complemented where I was short, where my skill set were short. And so she hired Marie, who was really strong in data and analytics, who's a data person. So when we talk about the stable, I think it's the sum of the parts.
Right.
Yeah. I have to believe that, John Wooden or somebody like that's going to have a lot to say about this because, sports teams, everybody on the team is exceptional at a couple things, but not at everything.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so they have to be able, they obviously need to perform at the top level of the thing that they're experts at, but they have to do everything else too. Jerry
Right.
Rice couldn't just go out and catch passes. He had to block.
Right.
Right. And so he had to become good enough at blocking. Let's say that he wasn't necessarily a natural blocker.
Right.
To be effective as a team member, separate from when somebody was going to throw the ball to him.
Right.
And so I think there's an interesting balance. We have to be, like me, no execution skills. I still have to do project management on projects.
Of course.
It meant that they weren't as managed as well, and it was more time from me, and blah blah blah. But I still had to do it.
Right.
If I had a project manager, I was always really happy, because they took a lot of that stuff that I wasn't good at off of my plate, and they were presumably good at it. That's why they are project managers and I'm not. So I think there's an interesting balance. I would say generally, you're going to make the most value if you make sure that people get to work a lot in the domain of their spikes.
Well, it's funny. We've often had a system, and I actually don't think we've even fixed the system. Our system is pretty much designed to target weaknesses.
Yeah.
If you think, this is why Joe knows this, I'm famously against annual performance interviews. I'm famously against them. And the reason is, there's so many reasons, but one of them is that often the focus is on, okay, you got a 4, you got on that, and a 5 on that 5. But look, this is your area. How are you going to improve next year? How are you going to improve on these 2 things? What goals are you going to set for yourself to get better at these other things?
Yeah. And
I think that's BS. I'm like, we just skipped over the stuff they're great at. We just focus on the one area where maybe they have a weakness. So because of that thinking, I spent a lot of time trying to learn how to code. I knew that my technical abilities were one of my weaknesses. I just didn't have strong technical abilities. So I would learn how to code, and I would start a development course. And I'd be in it a couple of weeks, and I'm just like, I freaking hate this. I can't focus. And I have a buddy of mine, my best friend. He tells me all the time. He has a degree in software engineering. He tells me all the time. He's like, Todd, you'd be so good. You'd be such a good software engineer. I can't like it enough to be good at it. I just don't enjoy it enough. And so I have done that like 3 times. I have started software courses and not finished them, development courses, until I finally realized, look, I got here not being good at it. Like, how good do I need to be good? I can speak the language enough to get by with my developers. I think I'm good.
Yeah.
I hit the baseline. I'm good.
Yeah. Yeah. And you might not even be able to learn it. It's like, I've always wanted to be much better at like drawing and visual ideas and all that kind of stuff. And I try over and over again, just like you. I spend $150 on an Apple Pencil so that I can start drawing on my iPad. I've literally used it for 10 minutes, because I can't do it. I'm terrible at it. I am not good at visual stuff. Right now, there you go. And it's like, it ranges from, I'm not, the mechanical dexterity, the manual dexterity just isn't there as part of it, right? That's something I learned in that Johnson O'Connor aptitude test that I mentioned earlier. But it's also just not the way my mind works. It doesn't work that way. I can see if a picture is good, but I can't make a good picture myself. And if I try to start from something good and improve it, it only gets worse. It always gets worse. It's very crazy. And so, so I've essentially said, I'm not going to try to get better at this because I just know that I'm not going to, having tried a number of times.
Right.
And why do I have to? I can pay somebody to do that, or I can have a colleague to do it for me or do it with me.
Right.
Or whatever. Right. Because I know that it's not going to be worth my time to try to do it myself.
So what's our closing advice? What advice would we want to give to a product manager or someone going into product management as it relates to their spike? Nils, I want to start with you on that one. Where would we start?
So I've got a list of things. One is definitely do the Clifton Strengths Finder because it's cheap, it's fast. And then once you've done it, you will not be able to figure out what it means just by reading the book. But there are some other resources on the internet. There's a podcast called Lead Through Strengths, which is really good for helping you interpret stuff. And you can talk to people, whatever. I think that's really a good one. But I think one is understand that people are stars of their own movies. If you want to be interesting, be interested. Because people think that interested people that are interested in their stuff are interesting. And as I think, Joe, you mentioned, listen to what people say about you. Not what they tell you when you ask, but what they say. And I think that's a really valuable thing. And then double down on your strengths and mitigate your weaknesses to the degree possible, and don't put a lot of effort into that. Put as little effort into that as you can.
Yeah. I think one of the things I would say is, look, if you know that if there's something that you're good at and you enjoy, that's often an indicator that that's your spike. There's lots of things I'm good at. Oh man, I'm just like patting myself on the back over and over. I'm so good at so many things. I can't.
You're amazing. You're amazing.
My gosh. Anyway, what I meant to say is there are things that I'm good at that I don't enjoy. There's things I'm good at and I don't enjoy. And I don't spike in those areas because I just don't apply myself fully. So if you realize you enjoy it and you're good at it, like, don't feel like it's selfish to continue pursuing that. Do it. If Joe, look, this world would be remiss if Joe didn't take advantage of his passion for coaching. Joe loves coaching so much and he's so talented at it that if Joe was to be like, you know what, I feel almost guilty for enjoying this and step back from it, that would be a disappointment to so many people. So that's the thing, is like, just find that thing that you love, that you're good at, lean into it hard.
Yeah. I think to wrap it up is being genuine, being true to yourself, right? If you love product management, then find your spikes, but be genuine. And that's going to come through in an interview. People are going to know you're faking it. They're going to know you're faking it. They're going to look at you like a fraud. That's the way I look at it, right? Yeah. You've got to be true to yourself. And that's, guys, it's hard because it's like, if I'm out there looking for a job, or, if I don't have a job, and what am I going to do to try to get that job? But I learned this in my career. All right, maybe you get hired into that job, but man, you're just going to be miserable because they're expecting something out of you that you're not. And then the result of that is your family and the people around you are going to be miserable because you're miserable, right? Like, it's just, I can say that now in my 40s, probably 30-year-old Joe Golly wouldn't have said that, or 25-year-old Joe Golly wouldn't have said that. But now that I've experienced it, it's just not worth it.
Product managers are literally amazing creatures. It almost never shows up on their resume how amazing they are. So this is an interesting thing, and it goes to, I think, Joe, this goes to my concern with what you said about being authentic or real or whatever, is you can be authentic and be boring. And you can be authentic and be exciting. Same person, same activity, same things you did. And most product managers err on the side of boring. So I've actually posted multiple times and done podcast episodes about the phrase, authenticity is everything. If you can fake that, you've got it made. I really believe that.
Nils, you've been fantastic. I'm so glad you came on the porch. Yeah. You got to come back sometime.
Well, anytime you invite me, I'll come over. I'll bring some sweetened tea next time.
Oh, we got to do that. And I want everyone to know, Nils, like you said, he helps people with their resumes. So if you're someone that's like, oh, I'm struggling to communicate my spikes, I'm struggling to communicate how special I am, that's one of Nils' spikes. So he can help you. You can follow and connect with Nils on LinkedIn. That's Nils Davis.
Easy to find.
This has been fun.
Gentlemen. Thank you, Nils. You've rocked, dude. I really enjoyed this.
I loved it. It was fantastic.
Thanks, Nils.
Thank you for joining us on the Product Porch. We release new episodes every 2 weeks. You can also find us on LinkedIn for more content. We offer a special thank you to AJ and Jack Blockere for the music. The views and opinions expressed by the hosts of this podcast are their own and do not represent nor necessarily reflect those of their employer.